December on Canada's west coast doesn't arrive with snow. It arrives with low clouds, steady rain, and a kind of grey that softens everything: the skyline, the horizon, and even the water itself. This morning, that same grey hangs over Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, where a constant stream of vehicles makes its way towards the docks. At first glance, it feels like any other transportation hub, but spend a few moments watching and it becomes something else entirely. A system in motion, one that quietly, continuously links mainland British Columbia to Vancouver Island, carrying not just people, but the goods and infrastructure that sustain life on both sides of the Salish Sea. For those traveling by car, this feels like a structured process, one that feels almost industrial in its efficiency. We step off the bus and are dropped directly at the entrance, bypassing the long vehicle lines. It's a small detail, but one that immediately changes how the journey feels. It's less about waiting and more about moving. Our journey today will have us crossing the international border, traverse through the Gulf Islands, snaking our way across the Salish Seas until we dock once more on land at the southern tip of Vancouver Island. Inside, the terminal is very functional but well organized, designed to handle very large volumes of passengers without feeling too chaotic. We collect our tickets at the counter. Originally, we had booked it for a later sailing, planning the day around a slower start. But with a bit of luck and a very helpful attendant, we have moved on to an earlier departure. From there, we begin the walk down the long gangway towards our berth. As we move further out, the ferries begin to dominate the view. They don't just occupy the terminal, they literally define it. Along the side of the ships, the artwork immediately draws your attention. Bold, graphic, and unmistakably rooted in Indigenous Coastal Salish design. It's not decorative additions, they're cultural expressions, created in collaboration with the local First Nations to reflect the history and identity of this region. As we get closer to berth 5, we spot a Victoria Transit poster that lists the buses that can whisk us downtown from the ferry terminal. It's rather useful to have this information handy, especially for those of us who are not very familiar with the region. Having left quite early, we hadn't had a chance to eat yet, so we decide to stop by the cafe at the terminal and grab something quick. We decide to grab a tea, a samosa, and a calzone. I know it sounds very strange, but it's a reasonable combination to our hungry minds. It's warm, filling, and convenient, which is what we told ourselves. But in practice, it doesn't live up to our expectations. The calzone in particular was overly doughy, dense, and lacking flavor. It feels more like something to get through rather than to enjoy, especially given its price. But it's the kind of choice that stays at the back of your mind, something you'll revisit later. Soon, boarding begins and we make our way onto the Queen of New Westminster. As we step on board, we see the vehicle decks below us already filling up. Nearby, another vessel pulls into the terminal, the Coastal Renaissance. Larger and more modern, part of a newer generation of ships. Seeing the two side by side, it highlights the evolution of the fleet, from older, long-serving vessels to newer designs built for capacity and efficiency. Inside, the shift is immediate. The cold drops away, replaced by warmth and a sense of space that feels unexpectedly open. There is a kids' playing area. It gradually fills up throughout the journey. It adds a low background energy to the otherwise normal space. There's seating arranged throughout the decks, not tightly packed, but spread out in a way that allows movement and choice. Not far ahead, a Christmas tree stands fully decorated. It's a small detail, but the one that changes the atmosphere noticeably, adding warmth to what would otherwise be a very neutral interior. Each level of the ship reveals something slightly different. On deck 5, near the lounge, we come across a business area, a row of cubicles with power outlets set up for passengers who need to work while traveling. It's a practical addition and a reminder that for many people, this crossing is not a novelty. It's simply routine. There's also a premium lounge available. We pause for a moment, consider it briefly, and then decide against it. With so much of the ship for us to explore, staying in one place feels very limiting. For regular travelers, however, the appeal is very clear. It's quieter and a more controlled environment. But for this journey, our experience lies elsewhere. The moment we step onto deck 5, the wind makes itself clearly known. It's not just a passing gust, but something constant, pressing against you, cutting through the layers, carrying a damp chill of the sea. Looking behind, we get to see the wonderful skyline of Vancouver. We see tall buildings pierce the clouds and disappear beneath them. Above us, seagulls and eagles hold themselves steady in the air, barely moving, using the wind in a way that feels effortless. We move towards the front of the ship to try and get a view of the captain's deck. Instead, we see more seagulls gliding in the wind. Stepping to the other side, the wind dies down here, being blocked by the ship. The temperature feels far more bearable. Moving to the rear of the ship, we see vehicles from the other ship slowly leaving and making their way to the mainland. And then, all of a sudden, beneath us, a low vibration builds. The thrusters engage. Slowly, the ferry pulls away from the terminal, creating distance before we begin to turn. The entire vessel rotates, aligning itself with the route ahead. Not long after departure, we passed through something you would never notice unless you knew it was there. Or were looking at a map just like me.
So maybe we were both right.
It's the maritime border between Canada and the United States. There's no visible indication, no line in the water, just open sea. After spending some time out in the chilling wind, we head back inside, letting the warmth settle once again. The gift shop draws us almost immediately. It's larger than expected and thoughtfully stocked. Clothing, books, travel items, and a selection of locally inspired pieces. Among them, painted porcelain bowls stand out, their design echoing the artistic influence seen earlier on the hulls. From there, we take the elevator down to the lower decks. 2 levels of vehicles stretch out beneath us. Cars are lined up tightly and trucks secured in place. Passengers aren't allowed to remain in their vehicles during the crossing for safety reasons. And standing in this space, it's very easy to understand why. This isn't simple storage, it's infrastructure in motion. With no bridge connecting Vancouver Island to the mainland, routes like this are essential. Everything that moves between the island and the rest of the province, food, fuel, material, passes through systems like these. It's easy to think of this journey as scenic for people who are not from this region, but for many, it's functional and very necessary. We step back outside onto deck 4. The pet area here sits empty. Exposed to the wind, it's very easy to see why no one has chosen to stay out here for long. As we walk towards the front, the resistance builds again. The wind presses against us, steady and unrelenting, turning a simple walk into something that requires a lot of effort. It feels like we're climbing uphill. Who needs a gym when you can battle Mother Nature, eh? At the bow, a metal bell is fixed into place, to be only used in times of emergency. Not to worry though, our sailing went without a hitch. Looking upwards, we see the captain's bridge. It's positioned high above the deck, looking out over everything ahead. We continue to remain at the front, with our ship now approaching the Gulf Islands. A crew member works nearby on the anchor system. He unlocks the arms that blocks the anchors from being released, preparing for what may be needed later in case an emergency arises. It's a quiet task and it's almost unnoticed, but it's part of a much larger system of readiness, the kind of detail that ensures a journey like this remains uneventful. Gradually, almost without a clear moment of transition, the environment begins to change. The clouds begin to break apart. The gloomy weather fades. The Gulf Islands emerge slowly. It's a low, forested landform scattered across the waters, creating a landscape that feels both open and enclosed at the same time. This region sits within a rain shadow, protected by surrounding mountains, and the difference is immediately visible. The colors deepen, the greens become richer, and the overall tone of the landscape feels softer and more alive. The water reflects this shift. What had been a flat grey now turns into a deep emerald. Along the shoreline, we see several houses. They're large, private, and hidden enough within the trees to feel quite secluded. All of a sudden, the sound of the ship's horn cuts through the air. It's low, resonant, carrying across the water. The horn is to warn any small boats that may be in the area of our arrival. In the distance, another ferry appears. For a brief moment, the two vessels share the same space, moving past each other with a sense of quiet familiarity, each continuing its own route through the islands. We try our hardest to wave at the other passengers. Hopefully, they saw us. While speaking with the BC Ferries staff, we were informed that we may be in for a treat. Just as the ship turns around the island, we are treated not by more rocks, but by sea lions. Resting still, their shapes blend into the rocks until you focus on them properly. There's something grounding about seeing wildlife like this in its natural environment. Unbothered, unaffected, simply existing alongside this route. On warmer days, they say that you can smell them way before you can see them. But for today, I think seeing them is more than enough. We make our way to the cafe at the rear of the ship on deck 4, and almost instantly, there's a realization. Well, it's more of a regret. This is where we should have eaten earlier. The food here looks noticeably better, fresher, and more carefully prepared, and far more appealing than what we had had at the terminal. The price of the food was very reasonable. There's variety, there's warmth, there's intention. Compared to our earlier meal, the difference is very clear. But now the decision was made, so instead we settle in for a cup of tea. After the cold outside, this is exactly what I needed. As the journey continues, the change in conditions become more noticeable. The wind begins to ease, the sky opens further, and land begins to appear in every direction. What once felt like open waters now feels more contained. The ferry moving through a network of islands rather than across a wide expanse.
Attention passengers, we are now arriving at the terminal. Coach bus passengers, please make your way to the lower vehicle deck. Foot passengers will leave the ship using the overhead walkway located on deck 4. Foot passengers traveling with pets will leave the ship using the main vehicle deck. All drivers and vehicle passengers, please return to your vehicles.
As we get closer to our terminal, the BC Ferries crew is seen yet again taking off the supports for the anchors, ready to be deployed in case of an emergency. As we draw further closer to land, the atmosphere shifts once again. The air carries new scents of pine, damp forest, and faint traces of wood fires from people's chimneys. The water color changes once more, from emerald green to a deeper blue, and then to a bright, almost tropical teal. The terminal at Swartz Bay comes into clear view gradually. Docking lanes, terminal structures, and vehicles waiting in organized lines. Located on the Salish Peninsula, just north of Victoria, this terminal serves as one of the primary gateways onto Vancouver Island. For many passengers, this is the final step in their long journey. For others, it's just the beginning. The ship begins to slow down, almost unnoticeably at first, but then the thrusters engage again, guiding the vessel sideways into position. It's a controlled movement, precise and measured, the kind that only feels simple because it's been done so many times before. Watching it unfold is quite hypnotic. We make our way towards the exit for foot passengers. Looking down along the terminal walls, marine life clings to the surface. Barnacles, mussels, seaweed, all of them thriving in the nutrient-rich environment created by the constant movement of water. Soon, we see the air bridge spring to life, rising up and extending the bridge onto the ship for us to disembark. And just like that, we are off. So, how much did this journey cost us? For foot passengers, the crossing is relatively affordable, typically around 20 to 25 Canadian dollars. Tickets can be purchased online or at the terminal, with sailings running frequently throughout the day. It's a system designed for accessibility as much as reliability. But beyond the practicality, what stays with you is the transition. From the grey skies of Vancouver to the light and green shoreline of Vancouver Island. From the structured movement of the mainland to the quieter rhythm of the island. This isn't a journey across water. It feels more of a gradual shift in place, in atmosphere, and in pace. And by the time you arrive, it already feels like you've traveled much further than the distance would otherwise suggest. Thank you so much for joining us on our Salish Sea crossing. Join us next time for more adventures somewhere around the world. Until then, bye!